The CIA, from the very beginning, at least as early as 1951, has used the information that it has collected, and it has used the information in order to penetrate and to manipulate the institutions of power in whatever country it is operating in order to influence the course of events in those countries. And essentially, this boils down to propping up those forces which are considered to be the friendly forces.
The CIA is not just a terrorist organization, it's the terrorist organization. It's the most successful terrorist organization on the planet. No other terror cell can ever come near the amount of facilitation that the CIA does, as the CIA has, oh, I can't even talk. No amount of terror organizations could ever come near the amount of facilitation that the CIA has done for those other terrorist organizations that we like literally point to now and say these guys are fucking violent and scary.
My dad.
And in penetrating, dividing, weakening, and ultimately destroying those forces which are considered to be the enemy forces.
Since its very inception as the Office of Strategic Services, the clandestine operations group known today as the Central Intelligence Agency has engaged in some of the worst atrocities in modern history. In this episode, we're going to take a brief look at some of the crimes of the CIA, and consider the possibility that maybe the good guys aren't so good after all.
The men and women of the Central Intelligence Agency. Without you, our nation's safety would be more vulnerable and our security fragile and endangered. The work you do each day is essential to the survival and to the spread of human freedom. You remain the eyes and ears of the free world. You are the tripwire over which the totalitarian rule must stumble in their quest for global domination.
Like, you could say that about the CIA to a T, to a fault.
As with every aspect of American life, the functions of the CIA are hailed as a way to protect freedom and democracy. Its agents are applauded as heroes. On the surface, the notion of gathering information to better understand the capabilities of other nations seems harmless enough. But as you probably already know, the CIA is not simply the ears of the nation. They're also instigators, propagandists, spies, saboteurs, torturers, and all too often, murderers. This is a huge topic, and one that I can't possibly fit into a short video, so I'll leave a bunch of links to other resources in the description. We're going to focus on some of the big picture stuff. Let's start with election meddling. According to US politicians, there's nothing more sacred than free and fair elections. We accuse other nations of meddling all the time. Recently, it's been Russia, Iran, and China getting the accusatory finger pointed at them. But as much as we want to project an image of our nation as a shining beacon of truth and freedom, we are the worst offender when it comes to meddling in foreign affairs, and it's not even close. The CIA isn't a fan of subtle manipulation. The intelligence agency wants the world to see the results of whatever election or administration they're disrupting. What they don't want is for people to know they're the ones pulling the strings. According to one study, the CIA had engaged in 81 overt or covert interventions in foreign affairs between 1945 and 2000. And that's just the ones we know about, and not even counting the constant meddling and destabilization of the last 20 years. The CIA's weapon of choice for foreign meddling is the military coup. One of the earlier examples is the overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran. Based on what you know about US priorities and the resources of the Middle East, what do you think was the catalyst for this coup? If you said oil, congratulations, you're right. The US beating up other countries for their oil isn't just a meme. Masada had nationalized the Iranian oil company, which negatively affected US and British economic interests. To make matters worse, from a US perspective, Masada, while not a communist himself, had earned the support of the Iranian Communist Party. As you'll come to see, one whiff of successful non-capitalist economics and the CIA is called in to destroy everything. In this particular instance, Winston Churchill and President Eisenhower decided to overthrow the government of Iran. The CIA paid some of Tehran's most violent mobsters to stage protests across the city, and orchestrated trucks and buses full of people to come in and seize the area. Between 200 and 300 people were killed in the conflict, which of course the CIA expected would happen. The intelligence agency then propped up a government under the rule of the Shah, who reigned as a monarch heavily dependent on US support to maintain power.
What do you think was going to happen when everyone categorically opposed and hated the West? At the time, by the way, Iran was incredibly progressive. I'm just letting you know that the reason why we now look at Iran as a theocratic, like not ethnostate, but like a theocracy, is directly a consequence of these actions. I'm sure he's going to mention it now.
Sada was arrested, convicted of treason by the new US-friendly government, served 3 years in prison, and spent the remainder of his life under house arrest. All for the crime of trying to lead his country out from under the boot of Western imperialism.
Like, how does this shit not make your fucking blood boil, dude? This is why people think I despise America, okay? Because they do despicable things. And not only do they commit these atrocities, like robbing someone of their freedom because they were a populist and a popular candidate that wanted to bring autonomy to their own country. They were democratically elected to do so. This is something that America does all the fucking time. We're going to talk about Chile in a second. I'm sure he's going to mention that as well. And then they turn around and do surprise Pikachu face like, why do these people despise us? Or then they turn around and say, socialism has never worked. Why is it that we never talk about fucking socialism in Norway? Norway's obviously not socialist, and neither was Iran at the time, and neither is Venezuela. But why is it that we never talk about Norway or Sweden or any number of these countries that are capitalist, but have robust social safety nets and have, like in Norway, nationalized their extraction industry in its entirety? Because America can't do a fucking coup in Norway. But they absolutely can and will continue to fucking abuse these other countries. And when they fail inevitably, they just say, all right, well, fuck it. They don't turn around and go, oh, we were wrong. Sorry for putting oopsie. Sorry for putting like a fucking fascist in a position of power in your country. They say, you're cut out. You're cut out from the global economy. Like Cuba.
The truth about this coup wouldn't come to light until 60 years later, in 2013, when CIA documents on the subject were declassified. These documents prove the CIA's planning and execution of the coup, their use of propaganda, bribery of politicians, security and military officials, and their approval at the highest levels of government. You may be thinking, okay, if they declassified this information, that means they don't do that kind of thing anymore, right? Well, no.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Straight guy, but I see you in my dreams every day.
But it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Joe.
Oh, it's so funny, dude. What a funny fucking take, dude. Oh, wow. That's cool. Great.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interest of democracy.
What is this?
Only for a very good cause in the interest of democracy, he says. Yeah. Wrong.
Laura Ingraham clearly gave this guy the chance to lie and say that we don't meddle anymore, but he didn't take it. The CIA director openly bragged about meddling in foreign affairs for, quote, very good reasons. Call me idealistic, but I don't think there's any reason for a country to disrupt the election process of other nations. But here we are. It's out in the open that we do it to this day. Here's another example of a CIA operative bragging about the types of crimes the agency commits.
We need to make the Iranians pay a price in Syria. We need to make the Russians pay a price. The other thing I would do...
We make them pay the price by killing Russians?
Yes.
And killing Iranians?
Yes. Covertly. So you don't tell the world about it, right? You don't stand up at the Pentagon and say, we did this, right? But you make sure they know it in Moscow and Tehran. Here's the other thing I want to do. I want to go after those things that Assad sees as his personal power base, right? I want to scare Assad. So I want to go after his presidential guard. I want to bomb his offices in the middle of the night.
Well, that happened about 2 years ago, as you remember, when his brother-in-law was...
I want to destroy his presidential aircraft on the ground. I want to destroy his presidential helicopters. I want to make him think we're coming after him, right?
These people aren't exactly subtle about the sabotage.
So that's terrorism. That's literal terrorism. And Trump didn't do anything different than what previous administrations have done, with the exception of like openly stating it from the bully pulpit because he's a fucking moron and also a gigantic racist, a virulent racist that understands that other Americans are racist in the way that they're careless about the lives and livelihood of other administrations. Now, this is why I always say America's at the heart of the America is the responsible party, or the Western world is the responsible party for these horrifically oppressive and in some circumstances like despotic dictatorships, because they necessitate that sort of authoritarian structure by not allowing any sort of fucking liberalism to occur in these countries. They are the ones who make sure that you have to have a fucking complete lid on all the information. Okay? That's why tankies fucking justify the most atrocious shit. Because America, if you don't have fucking full control over your information, will come in and they will literally fucking fund terrorists over and over again until your entire country is in a fucking state of disarray. That is the reality. That doesn't mean that it's a good thing that these countries do this. It's unjustifiable, half the shit that these countries do. But that's the reason why so many of these countries or so many of these leaderships want to maintain their control, want to maintain control and continue governing in a way that in a way that has autonomy. Why do you think Guaido is an American puppet who ran around and instead of fucking doing what the Constitution, what the Venezuelan Constitution allowed him to do, instead of doing that, he ran around and did a fucking apology tour in the West, and he was like, oh, we're going to normalize relationships with Israel. Like, what the fuck? You're Venezuela. What are you talking about? Why was he in America doing that? Why was he talking about how the first thing he was going to do is privatize the Venezuelan extraction industry? The fuck? Why? Why were they doing? Why was he doing that? Why didn't he just call for a second election? Which, by the way, Maduro did want to do. Why? I'm not saying Maduro's a good person. He's not. But why is it that Maduro was like, yeah, we can have outside third-party observers and do a re-election, and Guaido did not fucking want to do that or didn't call for it and instead spent all of his time and energy trying to do a fucking coup? Something that the American government admits, by the way, openly. That's the difference. Now we have American politicians, fucking Democrats, in the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee saying things like, we tried to do a coup and we failed because of Trump's incompetence. They admit it now. That's how fucking disgusting this country's foreign policy has become.
Sabotage and violence committed by their organization. But let's return to the past for a minute. There are plenty more coups to discuss. Another study found that the US was responsible for no fewer than 61 attempts at regime change during the Cold War alone, all spearheaded by the CIA. Just 1 year after the overthrow of Mosaddegh, the CIA launched another coup to oust Jacobo Arbenz, the democratically elected president of Guatemala. This is the moment the CIA established itself as a weapon to be wielded by Western capital. The agency was approached by the United Fruit Company, a US-based corporation, because they were afraid new anti-exploitation laws in Guatemala would negatively affect their profits. The CIA also suspected
has become American foreign policy has been the murder and rape and expand from the start. It's just developed in civilized forms. No. When I say has become, I am specifically referencing the outward, call to action about the carelessness in which we say that we are doing these things. Back in the day, they did these things, but they fucking never would admit it in public. They would simply say, oh, you don't understand. The people of Venezuela actually wanted a fucking coup to occur. Like, they wanted to execute Chavez. You know what I mean? They would say shit like that. This is democracy. They try to do that in Bolivia where they were like, oh no, Evo Morales is bad, guys. Evo Morales is really bad, really bad. Don't look at the fucking far right ultra nationalist Catholic fascists over there that are violently overthrowing the government. Focus on how democracy is succeeding in Bolivia. Like, they fucking did that. They tried to, at least. Failed.
Guatemala had ties to the USSR, and these two reasons were sufficient for them to launch a coup, oust the Guatemalan president, and install the first in a long line of right-wing dictators friendly to the US. This coup also set the precedent of the CIA lying to the president regarding casualties. So, by 1954, we had a largely unaccountable secret agency undermining
democracy. You think the 2016 Turkish coup attempt supported by CIA? Of course, dude. No, Fethullah Gulen is not a CIA asset. What are you, crazy? Why the fuck does he live in the Poconos in a fucking military compound then? No, of course Fethullah Gulen is a CIA asset, and of course the CIA wanted to fucking do a coup d'etat. 100%. That doesn't make Erdogan a good person. But yeah, of course the CIA fucking tried to do that.
Democracy and national sovereignty around the world. This trend would continue throughout the decades. In 1963, the CIA planned a coup that culminated in the assassination of the president of South Vietnam, once again in the name of fighting communism. This particular coup resulted in U.S. involvement in a foolish 10-year war, which cost the lives of 58,000 American soldiers and almost 1 million Vietnamese, many of whom were civilians. The CIA would go on to launch coups in Iraq, Cuba, the Republic of Congo, Laos, the Dominican Republic, Brazil, Chile, and countless other countries, each time with little reasoning besides, what you're doing isn't ideal for the US. These coups often led to horrible destabilization, including civil war, economic depressions, and hundreds of thousands of deaths. Over the course of their reign of terror, the CIA would develop techniques to aid them in the destruction of foreign nations.
Look, it's simple. If you have a horrific dictatorship in a country that still is doing tortures, that still has plantations and engaging in slavery, but they are on board with American industry, that American capitalists make money off of that, then that's infinitely better than a socialist revolution and the emancipation of all peoples on that land, reallocation of resources, land reforms. These are absolutely way worse for Americans, for American capital owners, than the opposite. And that's why they do it. That's precisely what they do. And that, by the way, I'm pretty much referencing what happened in Cuba. That's what I'm talking about currently.
One such batch of techniques was compiled in a 90-page handbook titled Psychological Operations in Guerrilla Warfare, which was distributed to the US-backed Nicaraguan Contras, and detailed how armed propaganda teams could build political support in Nicaragua for the Contra cause through deceit, intimidation, violence, and assassination. This was a trend that would prove very useful to—
Wait, what did you say? I missed it.
Psychological Operations. One such batch of techniques was compiled in a 90-page handbook titled Psychological Operations in Guerrilla Warfare, which was distributed to the US-backed Nicaraguan Contras, and detailed how armed propaganda teams could build political support in Nicaragua for the Contra cause through deceit, intimidation, violence, and assassination. This was a trend that would prove very useful to the US. By outsourcing their more heinous crimes, including over 50 assassination attempts.
In the Mozote massacre, US-trained militias, far-right paramilitaries, literally went to fucking farms where they would line up families when the father was out working. They would line up fucking entire families, execute them in the most heinous, horrific ways possible. These were American-trained militias, okay, operating at the behest of the United States State Department interests in our military-industrial complex. They would line up families and they would fucking create, like, they would recreate scenes with their decapitated and cut off body parts and shit like that. They would bleed babies into a fucking bowl and then sit the mother down and recreate scenes. Yeah. Like, that level of fucking evil. They would throw children. They would throw babies up. They would throw babies up in the air and fucking spear them with their bayonets. Where do you read about this? What's a good resource for this? Let's see. I don't know. I don't know what's specifically about. And then we fucking turn out. And then we turn around and act and ask. I think it was Killing Hope. Yeah. We turn around and act like, why is El Salvador in a state of disarray? Like, they raped and decapitated nuns. Yup. Is it a killing field? You literally have a beginning. You have like a beginning as a socialism theory. I'm just trying to gauge what your book recommendations are. Legit trying to learn. Do you think coups done against non-democratic states that lead to democracy are okay? I mean, those are revolutionary coups. Those are socialist coups. Like, that's what that would be. That would be something different than a American military-backed far-right paramilitary. Empire Files, the U.S. that trains dictators. Forget who I read that talked about it. Coups don't lead to democracy, lol. I mean, even nationalist movements have facilitated more historically in the dying end of colonialism under empires. Even nationalist movements have played a fundamental role in liberation. That's why I always make this argument. Like, even fucking American Revolution, exactly. Like, it's not always the same. I'm an archaeologist. My mother-in-law survived the war. They're still excavating bodies more than 20 years later. The damage found on these bodies is chilling. It's absolutely disgusting. I don't know how people can justify this and sleep at night. Yeah. Well, right, but I mean, if a CIA-backed coup that led to a democracy, would you support that? That's never happened, and that will never happen. A CIA-backed coup has never turned into a democracy, and it will never turn into a democracy. Why the fuck? We don't have democracy here, dumbass. Why would the CIA allow the fucking brown people that we don't even see as human beings have it? When we can just extract their natural resources with ease under a dictatorial regime. What the fuck? What do you mean? This entire video is about what the CIA has justified by saying we're bringing democracy overseas. It has never happened, and it will never happen. It's like saying, what if the KKK were to help black people? Like, it's oxymoronic.
Attempts on world leaders to local US-friendly groups, the CIA could maintain a level of plausible deniability. Here's former CIA officer John Stockwell discussing his time in the agency and what their goals were.
They undertake to run operations in every corner of the globe. They also undertook the license of operating just totally above and beyond U.S. laws. They had a license, if you will, to kill, but also they took that to a license to smuggle drugs, a license to do all kinds of things to other people in other societies in violation of international law, our law, and every principle of nations.
I think it might have been The Killing Zone by Stephen Rabe. It might have been that. I think that's who I remember talking about this. I think was it with. Yeah, I think it could have been. I think it is this book. Let me see. One second. I think it was this. Oh, this is the wrong thing. Never mind. All right, keep going.
Working together for a healthier and more peaceful world. We manipulated and organized the overthrow of functioning constitutional democracies in other countries. We organized secret armies and directed them to fight in just about every continent in the world. We encouraged ethnic minorities to rise up and fight. People like the Mosquito Indians in Nicaragua, the Kurds in the Middle East, the Mongols in Southeast Asia. We have organized, and we still do, and fund death squads in countries around the world, like the Treasury Police in El Salvador, which are responsible for most of the killing of the 50,000 people just in the 80s, and there was 70,000 before that. And orchestration, CIA, secret teams, and propaganda led us directly into the Korean War. We were attacking China from the islands Quemoy, Matsu, Thailand, Tibet. A lot of drug trafficking involved in this, by the way, until eventually we convinced ourselves to fight the Chinese in Korea. And we had the Korean War, and 1 million people were killed. Same thing for the Vietnam War, and we have extensive documentation of how the CIA was involved at every level, or the national security complex, because it's a very cooperative thing, into manipulating the nation into the Vietnam War. Let me just put it this way. The best heads that I coordinate with studying this thing, we count at least, minimum figure, 6 million people who've been killed in this long 40-year war that we've waged against the people of the Third World.
But funding coups and destabilizing entire regions takes a lot of money. Luckily for the CIA, their scope of work was broad enough to include a...
Yep. And you can't get direct funding for the American government. I mean, they do obviously still pay these operatives and stuff. But for example, when you want to arm a death squad, you can't literally be like, "Hey, I'm going to appropriate some of the fucking funds that you had allocated to the CIA and directly give it," because that's a paper trail. So what do you got to do then? What do you got to do, boys? How do you make that money? Well, plenty of money to be made in the black market, I think.
Particularly lucrative industry, drug smuggling. At least as far back as the Vietnam War, CIA operatives were heavily involved in trafficking drugs into the United States. CIA planes would make routine trips to and from places like Costa Rica and Honduras, working with cartels to secure massive amounts of heroin and cocaine, which...
We're on drugs, baby! It's great. It's a double bind. You sell drugs, you fucking sell drugs into impoverished communities, okay? And then impoverished, sorry. And then you can fucking build a permanent underclass after the abolition of slavery and after the civil rights movement. You can still have a permanent underclass. You know, a group of people that you over-police, that you fucking pump drugs into their communities and then you fucking over-police them. Not everybody, of course. Only the black and browns get over-policed, obviously. And then you are surprised when 1 out of every 5 black child in this country right now has one parent that's incarcerated. A percentage for whites is at 1 out of every 43.
They would then shuttle back to the US and sell for a healthy profit. Because of their secretive line of work, these planes could land in places where normal customs regulations don't apply. It's a dream scenario for drug smuggling. The piles of money the CIA makes from this practice have directly funded the undermining of democracy throughout the world.
By the way, this still exists. Like, they're just operating on the same networks that the CIA created or took advantage of in certain circumstances. Like, that's why Mexico has so many fucking guns. It's not like they're manufacturing the guns there. It's literally just guns that they trade for drugs that are illegal in America.
The added effect of introducing harmful drugs to the American population. Drug running and coups are bad enough.
Genuinely curious, how do American nationalists use all this fucked up shit? Do they just fake news it? Well, here's the reality. Most of you don't even know any of this shit because it's not taught in schools. Why the fuck would they ever teach this shit in schools? So you never hear about it. And when you hear about it, you turn around and you fucking say, when you hear about it, you turn around and you justify it with American exceptionalism, American individualism, like, and how the American State Department has never done anything wrong and never won't do anything wrong, and it's white supremacy too. It's the underlying motivating factors are white supremacist attitudes towards black and brown individuals in countries that are already in a state of disarray.
But what really makes the CIA a terrorist organization is their fondness for bizarre, questionable, and sometimes downright evil experiments.
You brainwash chat, lol. How? How have I brainwashed chat? Pretty new here. Does Hasan ever reply to non-subs? No, I don't. I never reply to non-subs. I just knew you would turn this shit racial. You're the only guy who would watch a CIA video on YouTube and turn it into something racial. You never fail. Great job. Yeah, when Norway wants to nationalize their fucking extraction industries, they don't get a fucking coup d'etat. But when Iran wants to, they do. So how is that not racial, my guy? The subjugation of black and brown countries is 100%, without a fucking doubt, much easier to do because they are the ones who fucking got the shitty end of colonialization and colonialist expansion. They did not get to develop in a similar capacity the United States did, so it makes it a ripe ground for further coup d'etats and further destabilization. Unless you're the child of immigrants, just as HasanAbi says, most Americans have no idea about this stuff. Yeah. You should off yourself? Oh, God. Like, imagine caping for the fucking CIA. Like, they don't give a fuck about you. They'd execute you too if you got in their way. Like, shut the fuck up, you brain dead moron. That's so weird that, like, tie it back to race, wrap it up. Like, imagine getting so fucking triggered about, like, fundamental American truths.
The CIA
fundamental American truths. Imagine getting so fucking triggered about them. Massacre forces Salvador to come to terms with the past Latin America investigation into the mass killings 11 years ago, whether the country will be able to heal. By the time U.S.-trained Salvadoran troops had completed a rampage through 6 villages, according to human rights monitors, about 800 peasants and their children had died, rounded up, gunned down, or beheaded with machetes. The massacre El Mzote 11 years ago is believed to be the largest mass killing of civilians in El Salvador's long and vicious fratricidal war. Today, with the war finally official, forensic experts have recovered and examined the charred and shattered bones of victims in an effort to prove the Salvadoran army and the governments both of El Salvador and the United States denied for years. Most of the more than 140 skeletons found so far extracted from a mass grave in the ruins of a parish house are of children. Several have bullet holes in the backs of their skulls. The emerging story of El Mzote is forcing El Salvador to come to terms with the hidden ugly truths of his grisly past.
Happy 2 months, Hassie. Love you. Thanks for doing.
By the way, a big part of the reason why you never heard about this and instead think like CIA is awesome. Oh my God, I'm an analyst. I can't go to Yemen. Is because you play Call of Duty, which is not a political game, by the way. That's why you think this shit is real and good and all they're doing is great, because liberal Hollywood tells you and has told you for your entire fucking lives, and your dumbass parents too, that everything the CIA has done, these horrific war crimes are actually either justifiable because the other side was much, much worse when they fucking weren't, or because they're brown and it was, again, justifiable and we are the good guys and they are the bad guys.
Since the end of World War II, the intelligence agency has experimented with everything from chemical weapons to biological weapons to mind control and death rays. The CIA is on a never-ending quest to find new ways to secretly kill or otherwise control their targets. You may have seen the movie...
Like, the funniest part about the Cold War video was that, like, MKUltra is real. Like, that's the fucking
drug running
program.
and coups are bad enough.
Yeah,
but what really makes the CIA a terrorist organization is their fondness for bizarre, questionable, and sometimes downright evil experiments. Since the end of World War II, the intelligence agency has experimented with everything from chemical weapons to biological weapons to mind control and death rays. The CIA is on a never-ending quest to find new ways to secretly kill or otherwise control their targets. You may have seen the movie The Manchurian Candidate. The film was based on the CIA's experimental mind control program, where a subject would be hypnotized and programmed with an activation word or phrase, something that, when heard, would trigger their CIA training and turn them into a sort of deadly automaton. The CIA wanted to create these sleeper agents and plant them in target countries around the world. It sounds absurd, but the Cold War was a scary time, and the CIA was a scary place. The secretive agency may have left the notion of mind control behind, but what they
Americans will be like, yeah, whatever the CIA did, terrorize the third world and pump drugs into our own country, but this absolutely never has and never will have anything to do with race. Nothing triggers us like saying something is associated with race or racism. I know. That's why some white people, not all, but some white people are more frustrated at the fact that, someone says the R word, racism, than saying the N word with a hard R. Okay? That's it. Like, they're more busy with people who cry racism than people who are literally doing racist shit.
They haven't given up is torture. Torture is something that no human being should be capable of doing to another, but it's part of the standard CIA toolkit, and it has been for years. This really only came to the attention of the American people during the Iraq War, when the horrific images from secret prisons and black sites like Abu Ghraib found their way onto US television screens. Waterboarding, sensory and sleep deprivation, dogs, insects, electrical shock. All of these and even more twisted techniques were
That's a person that's being dog walked, by the way, by an American soldier.
Were used to get supposed criminals to confess, or get war prisoners to give up valuable information. For years, the gruesome details of America's so-called enhanced interrogation program were hidden from the public. Bits of information.
Another thing that I gotta mention is, thank God for, shouts out to Not Your Average African, by the way, who fucking censored all this stuff. So a lot of this is justified in the eyes of the Defense Department. A lot of this is justified ultimately in the eyes of the American state. But the thing... These are... I literally studied about this section in my college. Yeah, my brain is fried, actually. I forgot.
Trickled out slowly over the course of the Iraq War and
the thing I was going to say is Trump fucking pardoned the Marine Gallagher, or not the Marine, the Navy SEAL Gallagher, Eddie Gallagher, who did similar things like posing with prisoners.
All of these
executed a prisoner in handcuffs, like
even more twisted
a 17-year-old one, by the way. And Trump fucking literally pardoned him, like recently, posed with photos in a similar capacity.
Used to get supposed criminals to confess, or get war prisoners to give up valuable information. For years, the gruesome details of America's so-called enhanced interrogation program were hidden from the public. Bits of information trickled out slowly over the course of the Iraq War and the years following. Now, nearly 2 decades after the CIA fabricated the intelligence that led us into war with Iraq, a fuller picture of the horrors of CIA black sites has been assembled. One prisoner, 49-year-old Abu Zubaydah, the first person to be subjected to the torture program approved by President George W. Bush, has provided drawings of what he experienced at a CIA black site in Thailand. Zubaydah, who was captured because the CIA mistakenly thought he was a top al-Qaeda lieutenant, describes waterboarding, which he endured 83 times, being crammed into a tiny confinement box meant to break his resolve, chained in so-called stress positions for hours. For example, his wrists being chained so high that he had to stand on tiptoes. He also depicts being hooded, chained in the fetal position, and tethered to a cell bar to prevent movement. He describes a process known as walling, in which the prisoner has his head banged into a wall, and when he falls down, he's dragged back up to his feet by a plastic wrapped towel around his neck. Another drawing shows a larger confinement box, pitch black, with the prisoner chained in a seated position over a bucket which was meant to serve as a toilet. Zubaydah also describes being deprived of sleep for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, kept awake by having water thrown on him and being chained in painful positions. This is the legacy of the CIA during the Iraq War and for...
Hey, by the way, Barack Obama did not prosecute these people in the previous administration. So, rip that fucking Band-Aid off real quick. If you think Barack Obama, who fucking knew all of this shit had happened, who ran on progressive change, literally said, we must not look backwards, we must look forwards, and even went so far as to say, we tortured some folks. This is the consequence of American empire. This is the bloodshed that we have caused all around the fucking world. Barack Obama did not prosecute these war criminals and expanded on the surveillance state and literally fucking kept Guantanamo Bay open. And on top of that, John Brennan became the CIA director. Like, The same people that like Trump is putting into positions of power were just as bloodthirsty and just as responsible for these atrocities under the Obama administration. And the same thing is going to happen under the fucking Joe Biden administration. So this is why I sometimes say there is a negligible difference, or not even negligible difference, between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party when it comes to American foreign policy. It's disgusting, it's horrific, and this is absolutely not something that the Democrats or the Republicans ever fucking engage in, honestly. Yeah, neoliberals be like, we torture some folks, but they put a fucking X on there instead of a KS. So, you know, it's non-binary small bean torture. So, hey, they're being, that's so good. That's a really good joke, man. Holy shit. Don't you think other countries would do the same if they had the money, power, and reach that America has? How is that okay?
To get the bad ending, and it deserves
like, this is the other part of this I understand. Like, oh, we're doing it because we can? The fuck you mean, bitch? The fuck do you mean? First of all, they don't. Secondly, if they did, then wouldn't you say that they're fucking horrible? Especially if they did that to your mom and dad? Huh? They did that to your cousins? How would you fucking feel? Idiot.
Years after, cruel, inhumane torture, approved by the very highest authority in the country after the CIA fabricated the reasons for invading Iraq in the first place. Today, the CIA...
But hey, whoa, second thought.
After the
Whoa, that's really fucked up, sir. This man is a brave truth teller now because he's on board with Joe Biden. Joe Babe. I love when people say, wait, didn't the KGB do the same in the Cold War? It's like, bitch, is that acceptable? Are you a fucking fan of the KGB then? Like, why are you saying that? Like, how is this acceptable? Like, it's not acceptable when they do it. It's not acceptable when we do it. What the fuck is this? It's such a weird take whenever people say, like, well, didn't the KGB do it? Oh, okay, never mind then. Are you a fan? Are you a big fan of the KGB then? No, they're fucking terrorists. They're fucking terrible. It's like, oh, okay. What's wrong with torturing? What's wrong for torturing terrorists? No kappa? Okay, I'm going to assume that you're a Zoomer, so you have never fucking seen the consequences of this shit. And because you're a product of American education, that you just have a fundamental missing part of your brain that should describe to you that torture is immoral across the board, no matter who the fuck we're torturing. Okay? That's one. And two, half the time these people aren't even fucking real terrorists. Terrorism is a political designation that you come up with to justify these sorts of horrific actions. Okay? And three, even if they were real fucking terrorists, it's literally empirically proven to be unsuccessful in revealing any data. People literally end up lying to get out of it. Also, Trump called Antifa terrorists.
The CIA fabricated the reasons for invading Iraq in the first place. Today, the CIA claims they no longer torture human beings. Instead,
Lies.
They're known to train non-Americans to do it for them, to maintain their plausible deniability. The CIA trains, observes, and provides equipment to foreign agents who are less constrained by public outcry. The torture continues.
Yep.
But now the CIA can claim that they're not the ones doing it. The question you're probably thinking is, why? Why would our country allow this organization to exist? It clearly doesn't protect freedom and democracy like Reagan claimed. The answer is simple. The US wants to maintain its #1 spot. We're currently the sole world superpower, and in order to maintain that position of power, the country needs to make sure that the rest of the world depends on us, and it needs to make an example of alternative economic structures that would undermine the notion of American capitalist supremacy. But don't just take...
Do you understand why people hate America a little bit more when you see stuff like this, though? Like, do you get it? Do you understand? Like, if someone did this shit to you, you get triggered when you hear about like fake stories. You get triggered when you hear about like how horrible like some Muslim country is to their own citizens or some shit, and you justify American action against them. Now imagine actually fucking doing this to you. If any of these countries actually did this shit to you, you would of course fucking fight back. That's where this comes from. That's why these people fucking despise us. That's why they hate us. They have every reason to hate us. We destroy their countries. We fucking torture their people.
Get from me. Here's former CIA operative and whistleblower Philip A.G. talking about the U.S. relationship with Cuba and why we were so adamant in destroying them.
So it's not hopeless, but you see how the United States is going around in these areas of economics and of trade and of commerce and finance to try to make the Cuban people suffer as much as they can. And this is affecting, in a drastic way, very young children and infants, and also the older, in other words, the most vulnerable. And it is an eternal shame on the United States, in my opinion, that we would do such a thing to an entire country, just because we don't like the system, just because they won't come under our protection.
Did you review Jordan Peterson videos, but in context? Get the fuck out of here, you stupid fucking pleb. I don't give a single shit about your sycophant daddy, okay? Get the fuck out of my chat, you dumb fuck. Jordan Peterson videos? Shut the fuck up, bitch. I did a fucking 2-hour Jordan Peterson broadcast. You're still over here like, hey, I need you. Oh, my daddy. Fucking idiot.
Basically, it's a kind of a mafia attitude, and it has been that way since Eisenhower.
Well, that's capitalism.
Well, it's also the United States and our tradition of being very nervous when we don't control something. And when a country like Cuba slips out from under our control, after we had ruled it practically as a neo-colony or a protectorate for 59 years or so, then it makes people nervous because they know that if the Cubans are successful in their example of being able to provide as a poor country the best medical care in the third world to the whole population.
You go to compare the bombing of third world countries to 9/11, that's how you get the chuds? Wait, what do you mean? Like, that's how I get them to convert? That's how I get them to understand? Because they won't understand. Bombing of the third world is not happening to them. 9/11 is happening to them. So they're never going to understand it. 9/11 is American citizens dying in the hands of brown people. That is not only a horrific tragedy, which of course it is, but it's also shameful because, you know, these heathens, these barbarians were able to take something from us and kill 3,000 innocent civilians. So that, of course, is going to be infinitely different in the eyes of Americans because of American exceptionalism than brown people dying overseas in bombing campaigns, in sanctions placed on Iraq, for example, under Bill Clinton that literally killed 500,000 children. You know, that sort of stuff is in the eyes of American empire considered collateral damage that's justifiable. Oh, speaking of which, the CIA also has blood on their personal hands on 9/11. Not that they like did it themselves, but the people that ended up doing 9/11 were still, to some degree, coming from a long line of fighters that were trained by the CIA, and also there was not enough interagency cooperation when there was plenty of information about a potential horrific attack on U.S. soil that was inevitable and coming. You know, don't forget that we don't give a shit about our own people. We don't give a shit about our people dying either.
Because it's an inclusionary system. It's not like we have here, where you have this huge bulk of the population, you know, marginalized. But there, if everybody can have adequate medical care, if the schooling is adequate for all, and remember, Cuba has more doctors and more teachers per capita than any
Hasan, I love you, but can you please elaborate your take on the 2016 coup in Turkey? Why would the CIA coup a NATO member run by a far-right authoritarian like Erdogan? Because Fethullah Gulen is another far-right authoritarian, but Fethullah Gulen is a CIA asset, and a CIA asset with a lot of control inside of the Turkish government, like the literal deep state or a parallel government, if you want to, if you will, that they had created alongside Erdogan. Fethullah Gulen and Erdogan come from the same school. They come from the same branch of Islamic conservatism, but Fethullah Gulen is an American CIA asset, whereas Erdogan is simply a government figure that was beholden to American interests and was being a good, willing dog for a very long time. But as soon as they stray away from American interests in the region, then they thought that it was probably abi Tayyip fakeledi amına koyayım ne CIA yapmayın etmeyin arkadaşlar. Tayyip fakeledi falan gibi laflar etmeyin, saçmalamayın. İstediğin kadar. There's still people in Turkey that this is something that people do not know about. Like, they don't know the full details of still to this day. And there are people who still think like Tayyip Erdogan faked the coup on his own. But I'm not one of those people. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I think the evidence, there's way too much evidence of like Fethullah Gulen's corruption, or not corruption, but like influence within the military, even within the police force, within the fucking the judicial branches, with his own personal judges, that hey, thank you for the 73 big ones, Anthropology. It was such a shit coup. No way that was the CIA. Hello? Have you seen the fucking CIA recently? They did like 3 shit coups in the past, under the past administration. Bolivia failed. Fucking Venezuela failed like twice. Okay? So, no, it definitely is textbook 2016 CIA. It's textbook Donald Trump CIA. It's I mean, there were old, like Bay of Pigs is another one, but I'm saying that like the CIA has been very, very, very unsuccessful in recent years.
Country in the world. And they have succeeded in these areas, and it's all state supported, which means people don't have to put money out for the medical care or for they of course pay the cost indirectly as a whole society, but they don't have to pay the bill in the hospital and so forth. And so that cannot be allowed to stand. It's a very bad example for the United States. So there's a very large mass of people out there who can look at Cuba and say, well, if they can do it, and on a per capita income of $2,000, $2,500 a year, where ours is $22,500 a year, what's wrong with our system? I mean, maybe we ought to consider an alternative.
That's why Nicaragua, Sandinista Nicaragua, had to be destroyed.
Exactly. They were a bad example, and that's why Grenada had to be destroyed, because any movement that comes to power with the idea of providing for all the people and of escaping the control of the United States and its economy, let's say the corporations and so forth, then that is bad news here in the United States in the upper circles of power.
So there you go. It really is that simple. The U.S. wants to maintain its global supremacy, and that requires destroying any competing economic.
Real question from an ignorant Mexican. So Hugo Chavez was right when he said the Venezuela struggles were caused in some capacity by the U.S.? Yeah, of course, dude. What? 1,000%. Yes. Same with Cuba. Same with Iran. Same with every fucking country. Chile is another example, but this time a successful coup that did not fail, I guess. It was a successful coup. Look at the situation in Chile currently. Yeah. Without a fucking doubt. It's like every single country that we have meddled in the affairs of. Arg, my basic economics? No. Yeah.
economic system to prevent people from questioning capitalism, and it requires keeping the rest of the world under the boot of the United States.
By the way, hey, yeah, if you want to understand the CIA coup attempts now, this is what it looks like. They get owned by fucking Venezuelan fishermen, all right? So, not looking too good. Absolutely not looking too good. They did like 3 of these under, they did like 3 of these since 2016. There was like a explosion of a drone near a Chavez, fucking, what am I, Sidney Powell, near a Maduro speech when he was doing a demonstration with the military. They tried to send arms under the guise of sending in aid. Another big fucking super duper CIA move is always like, oh, we're doing humanitarian aid. Oops. What do you mean there's AR-15s in the, what do you mean there's M16s in these boxes of food? This is just aid. This is just aid, brother. No shoes having Andy. Yeah, U.S. aid equals CIA.
People from questioning capitalism, and it requires keeping the rest of the world under the boot of the United States. It's criminal and morally reprehensible, but who's going to stand up to the most powerful bully in the world? For those of you thinking that this doesn't matter because you live in the US, I've got bad news for you. In 1975, a U.S. intelligence committee found that the CIA owned more than 200 wire services, newspapers, magazines, and book publishers, and subsidized many more. A separate New York Times investigation revealed an additional 50 media operations run by the CIA, both within the US and abroad, and another 12 publishing houses which had produced over 1,200 books secretly commissioned by the CIA. Okay, what does this mean? It means that the CIA has been running a secret propaganda.
This is why tankies aren't 100% incorrect when they say, wow, that's CIA propaganda, that's American State Department propaganda, that's imperialist propaganda, whenever they talk about shit that like other countries are doing. That's precisely why it's rather strange when, we're trying to go to war with Iraq, every fucking media outlet, including the Gray Lady, absolutely drops the ball for some fucking weird reason and justify weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's so crazy. That's so wild. What happened? Oopsie, we just lied about everything. That's why whenever people say communism, you're like, oh, 100 million guerrillian people died under communism directly at the hands of communism as a system itself. Like when you look at things like the Black Book of Communism and, how many people have died under communism, it's like people that died under famine, except, when people die because of famine in the world currently under a global capitalist structure, it doesn't fucking matter. 14 million people die a year because of famine and famine-related diseases, but that's individual responsibility, and that's why those people are fucking losers, and that's why they die. But under communism, they die because of communism. Actual fucking Nazis that were killed by the army, the USSR army, like that's literally attributed to deaths under communism, just like psychotic nonsense. Just absolutely preposterous shit, like getting super horny. Doesn't mean that like the USSR was good across the board. I'm not one of those fucking people at all, but just remember that shit.
Propaganda campaign on American citizens for almost half a century. More recently, the agency has awarded contracts worth billions of dollars to Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, Amazon, and Google to complete assignments issued by the CIA. The Central Intelligence Agency has its tendrils in every single aspect.
Yo, my man said, do you think they're running operations in the EU? Should someone tell them? Look up something called Gladio.
Thank you, Grape2, for the Tier 1 Amazon Prime Twitch Prime Gaming subscription.
Of course they did shit in the EU, dude. What are you, crazy?
Aspect of modern life. Books, magazines, movies, television, social media, and big tech. Just as the CIA works hard to undermine freedom and democracy around the world, it also works hard to keep Americans convinced that they live in the greatest country on earth, and that there is no alternative to American supremacy. The CIA is a terrorist organization, the biggest one in the world, and it needs to be abolished and its records made public.
I love that ad. This is a new CIA ad that they came out with, where it's like, look at how diverse our agents are. It's really funny.
organization.
This is a real fucking CIA ad.
The biggest one in the world, and it needs to be abolished and its records made public. The United States has no right to impose its will on the rest of the world, and it certainly has no right to do it in secret.
Yes, Chad, I am
This
CIA.
episode was sponsored by...
Yes, I am CIA, of course. That's why I'm criticizing them and talking about shit that the CIA literally pays to make sure is not discoverable or talked about in the media or vilified by people who talk about this sort of stuff. Because I am CIA myself.